Hello, everyone. Welcome. With me, Noor, as your narrator. Tonight's story marks the beginning of a space called slow resonance, a place where stories are not told in haste and where silence is given time to speak in its own way. In the future, many other stories will follow, each carrying traces of events that may have occurred around us, yet are rarely spoken about calmly. It feels fitting to begin tonight, when the atmosphere leans toward quiet, and our attention is no longer divided by too many distractions. Have you ever been in a place that feels familiar during the day, yet changes entirely once time passes a certain boundary? And are all the activities we witness truly happening in the same moment we exist within? The story I am about to share is one that occurs more often than we realize, though it is rarely discussed openly. A real experience that took place within a university campus, an environment meant for academic activity, yet at certain hours it holds something else entirely. There is one classroom, one corridor, and one moment in time that should never be crossed alone. At the end of this story, we will reflect briefly on beliefs and unspoken rules that exist within educational spaces, particularly those related to place, time, and residual activity that is believed to never fully disappear. Let us begin tonight's story. This experience took place while the main figure of this story, a university student named Cindy, was still attending college. She was a student in the accounting program at a university located on the island of Java. On the day it happened, the campus had just completed a series of exams. That afternoon, a student association event was held as a closing activity for the academic period. Normally, once such events conclude, the campus quickly becomes empty. Especially since the employee class schedule was on break, there was little reason for students to remain in the buildings after late afternoon. That day, however, a light rain had been falling since the afternoon. Not heavy, just enough to make the air colder and the campus noticeably quieter than usual. Cindy was never particularly interested in staying until the end of crowded events. She was not the type of person who felt comfortable in noisy environments for long periods. Coincidentally, one of her classmates felt the same way. The two of them decided to wait inside the classroom until the event ended. The accounting department was housed in an older building, located on the upper floors. The paint on the walls had begun to fade, and the corridor stretched straight toward the stairwell. Near the stairs, a large mirror was mounted on the wall of each floor, something that had long been part of the building, rarely questioned by anyone. At first, the atmosphere inside the classroom felt normal. Cindy and her friends sat quietly, chatted briefly, then fell into silence. At some point, fatigue crept in. Without realizing it, Cindy fell asleep in her chair, the steady sound of rain outside forming a soft background. When she woke up, something felt different. The air inside the classroom was colder. The lights were still on, but outside the windows, the sky had already turned dark. She glanced at her phone. The time showed a few minutes past sunset. Her friend was no longer there. On her phone screen, there was a short message sent nearly an hour earlier, explaining that her friend had decided to leave first as the rain grew heavier. Cindy exhaled slowly. Her body felt weak, her head slightly heavy, likely from sleeping in an awkward position. She packed her bag and stepped out into the corridor. The hallway appeared empty, accompanied only by the faint sound of rain from outside the building. But when her gaze shifted to the classroom across the corridor, her steps slowed. Inside that classroom, there was activity. Some people were seated reading. Others stood near the whiteboard. A few moved back and forth as if engaged in discussion. At a glance, it looked like a normal class session, but something felt wrong. Cindy did not recognize a single face inside that room. And this was the accounting floor, where she should have recognized at least a few students. The faces inside the classroom appeared pale. Their eyes were empty, as though they were acting without awareness. Cindy tried to think rationally. Maybe students from another program. Maybe an activity she didn't know about. With that thought, she moved closer. To reach the stairwell, she had no choice but to pass in front of that classroom. As she walked by, several of them slowly turned their heads toward her. Instinctively, Cindy gave a small smile and nodded in greeting. No one responded. The moment she passed the classroom doorway, all sound inside abruptly stopped. Silence fell heavily. With a voice barely steady, she excused herself softly and quickened her pace. The hair on the back of her neck began to rise. A few steps later, the sound of a chair being slammed echoed from behind her, followed by the harsh scraping of desks being dragged across the floor. Cindy turned around. The classroom was dark, empty. There was no one inside. Her heart pounded. Without thinking, she ran toward the stairwell, but she stopped abruptly. In the corridor leading to the stairs, a line of students stood in formation, facing her. Their clothes looked worn, stained with a brownish discoloration. Their pale faces stared without expression. One of them slowly raised a hand and pointed directly at Cindy. Then a soft voice, almost a whisper, called her name. Cindy forced her legs to move. She walked slowly past them, acting as though she saw nothing. From the corner of her eye, she could feel their gazes tracking every step. Whispers grew louder, though the words remained incomprehensible. When she reached the stairs, Cindy did not look back. She ran downward, breath ragged, her thoughts unraveling. At the lower floor, Cindy nearly collided with the campus security guard. Seeing her pale face and unsteady breathing, he immediately tried to calm her. She told him everything she had seen, her voice still trembling. The guard fell silent for a moment before speaking softly. He said the building often showed such disturbances at night. Long ago, a tragedy involving a female student had occurred there. Since then, the mirrors near the stairwells were often linked to strange incidents. Some called it leftover activity, others referred to it as residual time. Since that night, Cindy has made a point of never staying on campus after sunset, especially in the accounting building. Not out of excessive fear, but because she understands now that not every activity we see exists within the same moment as we do. When viewed calmly, this event did not happen suddenly. There was no single major decision that led Cindy into the experience. It was built from small sequences. The rain that emptied the campus, fatigue that led her to fall asleep, sunset passing unnoticed, and the choice to walk through the corridor alone. In Southeast Asian beliefs, even educational environments carry unspoken restrictions. There is a reason our elders once warned against staying too long at school or campus after sunset. Spaces like classrooms, corridors, and mirrors are believed to retain traces of past activity, especially when something significant once occurred there. Not to frighten, but to remind us that not every place becomes truly empty when humans leave. Perhaps right now, you feel safe. You are in a familiar, well-lit space. But remember this, not everything that moves alongside us exists in the same time as we do. If you have ever experienced or heard a similar story in a school or campus environment, or if you have an experience you have never shared, the comment section is always open. Not for proof, just for sharing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that are rarely spoken about. This is where our story ends tonight. Stay aware, because sometimes we are not truly alone. Until next time.